Welcome to the podcast that brings you high voltage, intriguing information, as well as electrifying conversation on all topics, current, past, and yet to be. This is Phase to Phase.
The first step in avoiding the trap is knowing of its existence.
I've been having these weird thoughts lately.
Without change, something sleeps inside us and seldom awakens.
Here are your hosts, Marcus and Drew.
Oh, it's Magick. You know. I think it was off in the octave there a little bit there.
Oh, okay. Let's
no, you were great, dude. You were great. Okay, one more time. And go.
See, you're flat. No, you're flat.
You're
no,
flat.
No.
No, like this. You're like this.
You got to hold one earphone while you do it.
And you got to bump your head back and forth. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, do the thing with your hand.
And what's this thing you're doing with your hand? Yeah. You're pretty much offensive to all the five senses. That was only 4 senses. Yeah, well, you know that smell that's like so smelling that you can like taste it in the back of your mouth? That's what's happening right now, and you taste fucking horrific, like salty garbage. Truly horrific. Just some first thoughts before we begin, because like with most things, the things that we think we know, we don't necessarily know where they come from.
Right.
You know what I mean? In regards to like magic, like if I were to say that to you, what kind of like, words and imagery would be brought to your head?
I come up with more accurately or what are called illusionists, like people doing magic tricks.
Okay, right. Magicians.
Or just
in the modern
complete
term.
Fantasy Tolkien type of wizardry.
Yeah, Merlin.
Yeah.
Yeah, freaking.
Or maybe even like an alchemy type of thing.
Harry Potter, or Disney's freaking like the Mickey Mouse Fantasia thing, like, or Hollywood, anything Hollywood related, of course, right? So we have these like kind of preconceived conceptions about things. I call them loaded terms, right?
Okay.
So a lot of these loaded terms come with like what a lot of people call cultural baggage.
Sure. Connotations.
Loaded, right? Yeah, exactly. So when people say magic today, they just mean like amorphous, like inexplicable, intangible, inconsistent, miraculous.
Something that the brain doesn't understand.
Basically. Exactly, dude. Totally. And that's like fair, but it's not accurate. You know what I mean? So before we begin, I guess the ultimate question to take away from this podcast is, where do my beliefs actually come from?
Oh, okay. Mostly porn.
Yeah, that and cartoons for me. You know what I mean? Also, as you know, Marcus, I'm not like particularly religious.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the amount of time we've known each other, I don't think I've ever like tried to talk to you about like religion or anything like that. Really?
Oh, the first time you said you came here with the Bible and you said,
have you accepted? Have you accepted Satan as your Lord and Savior? People who, sacrifice their goats to Satan, deserve neither goats nor Satan. That's not mine, by the way.
A fool and his goat are easily parted.
I read that on somewhere. A dude I was interacting with on Twitter said that. I'm like, oh my God, I'm totally going to use that. I'm going to be using a lot of terminology that has a lot of like religiously loaded terminology.
Okay, right.
And people are just going to have to get over it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I know it can make people like uncomfortable and be like, you're being judgmental. It's like by using these words in this analogy, it's like, yeah, well, I'm sorry. This has literally been around for eons.
Right.
So deal with it.
When you're talking about magic in like the truest sense, like the most realistic sense, I guess, societally relevant sense.
Yeah.
I think of like things that are rooted in like paganism, like any kind of like Wiccan stuff and things like that. That's basically
definitely a part of it.
Right.
It's like one of those things where it's like not all of this is this thing, but all of this thing is that thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Actually, there's a really good like poem that Crowley fucking wrote down that was said basically, we place no reliance on virgin or pigeon. Our method is science. Our aim is religion. I mean, I'm obviously speaking for him here. I have no idea exactly what he meant. And for all I know, it was something else. But it seems to me that basically what he's saying is that like I'm not trying to rely on like spurious, intangible things when I go to prove things about like religion. I'm looking for truth. I'm looking for like the true meaning of like why we're here and what we're doing. And in reality, and the truth of reality and stuff like that. You know, and I'm trying to use. That's why I think he used the word science because he wanted some sort of like replicable, standard.
Right.
So there's all kinds of different magic. And by the way, all this is magic with a K.
Right.
Just so you know.
Right.
It's totally different than magic with a C. So, but we're going to be talking about in general the umbrella term as we just kind of mentioned or whatever. And there's all kinds of different magic. There's like black magic, white magic, chaos magic, hermetic magic, Sex Magic, which is my favorite. Before we really
Magic the Gathering.
There's that's the new one. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Kind of before we begin this journey, we're going to do how we do here on the main episodes here and kind of discuss some terms, right? Mm-hmm. So I have like 2 or 3 older terms just to kind of get everybody reacquainted because we talked about some of this, I think, in our Secret Societies episode. In addition, we have a bunch of new terms that we're going to be adding here so we can kind of flesh them out.
Sure.
So the first up is an old classic, occult.
Right.
Remember that one? That's so the Oxford English Dictionary refers to it as like spooky, supernatural, mystical, magical beliefs or practices or like a phenomenon, of like that, right?
Okay.
Wrong.
No.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you. Exactly. I couldn't believe when I read that. I'm like, that's what the Oxford English Dictionary says? That's not true. No, it's basically what it means is to shut off from view or exposure, to cover or eclipse. It's to hide, to make secret. Yeah. That's what occult means. I had this argument with this dude online or whatever who was talking about how like the occult is evil. I'm like, the occult is nothing. The occult is just knowledge, dog. Like, there's probably not good shit in it, but like for you, yeah, exactly. For you to be like, knowledge is evil. You're like, well, that's retarded. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of things in knowledge that are not good. I don't want to know how to fillet like another human being, for instance, or something like that. But like knowledge isn't good or evil. It's just, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So next on the list is esoteric. Another fun word to say. And that's basically it's just intended for or likely to be understood by a small number of people.
Right.
With like a specialized knowledge or interest.
Coded message.
Yeah, exactly. So last on the old terms list, we have Gnosticism, which of course is just a Greek word meaning to have knowledge. And so I guess, just like I mentioned earlier, Gnosticism is like the umbrella term for like a collection of religious ideas and practices by like various like cults of the late, like pre-Christian and post-Christian, early and post-Christian freaking centuries or whatever, right? And these various groups would emphasize personal spiritual knowledge over the orthodox like teaching and dogma of and traditions of like the authority of the church, right?
Right.
Of the church at the time. So now we're gonna get into some of the new lingo here.
Ooh. 2.0.
Yeah. And that's
what are the kids talking about?
And that's this magic with a K.
Oh.
So yeah. Arthur C. Clarke, the famous English like sci-fi writer, formulated his like famous 3 laws. And one of which was like, I think it's the most best known and most widely, and that's that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
From magic.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And in a kind of way, he's kind of right. And another interesting person who kind of mentioned about this, who kind of talks a lot about esoteric knowledge and the occult and stuff, is this dude named Gordon White.
Okay.
And he said that magic is basically the cultural expression of the natural effects of consciousness.
I'm gonna have to rewind that.
No problem. Easy. Right. See, yeah, the cultural expression of the natural effects of human consciousness, basically.
Okay.
That is magic. The thing that we have taken from nowhere and made into something.
Oh, I see what he's saying. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And each of it on its own individual level. That's why I said culture, because like each one is different than every,
Sure.
We don't all pull the same thing out of the collective consciousness, the ether, right? So basically what magic is, dude, is just a system of, some have even called it like a technology. If you understand what the true word is. I can
see that argument.
Yeah. That appeals to the power of the subconscious, that appeals to the power of the mechanisms of the subconscious.
Okay.
Okay. And so our subconscious is that thing that kind of decides on its own whether or not to like fold in and encode the information around us, and it chooses what to discard. Too, right. We
Absolutely.
actually have presumably we could reach that level one day, but like as it stands right now, we don't have the ability to kind of know what like our subconscious suggests is important or not. Right. That's why they used to have those like subliminal ads like in old movies. Right. This hypnosis works so well on like extremely suggestible people, right?
Smoke.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Man, last year the peaches are coming in mighty early this year. Cuts to the guy. Smoke. You smoking yet? But yeah, that's why, and we kind of talked about this in our I think it was our first MK Ultra episode, our first episode basically, about the power of hypnosis and how it works so well on like highly suggestible people. Exactly. That's why like subliminal messaging goes like below the threshold of the conscious mind.
Right. Try to sneak in there.
Yes, exactly. That's where symbolism lies, right? Is in the subconscious mind. So like, again, call back to the MK Ultra episode where why I personally find like marketing and psychology specifically so fascinating, dude. Yeah. because it basically...
It's turning those gears in the subconscious.
Yes, exactly, dude.
Yeah.
It's using those mechanisms that we were just talking about to kind of hijack your free will, dude.
Right.
And
suddenly I feel like I should buy some Lay's potato chips.
Yeah, totally. You know what Ford is? I think is the car for me. Like, you know what I mean? Chevy can suck it. Like,
Who said that?
Yeah,
Where'd
you know what I mean? Like, I'm a Budweiser man myself. Like, yeah, exactly, dude. And using that predictive programming and propaganda and freaking symbolism, which is just code, right? A symbol is a thing
Esoteric
that means something else.
to your subconscious.
Exactly, dude. And we assign meaning and value to these symbols, right? Sometimes we don't even know that like there's value and meaning assigned to certain symbols, and we're walking around in a fucking fog of data and information and stuff that sometimes we're not even picking up on.
Right. We're just not tuned to the right frequency.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. Like with freaking like radios or whatever, or microwaves or freaking infrared light.
EM is going on everywhere.
That's what I'm saying, dude. We're walking around in a fucking information cloud, dude. Yeah, exactly. And we're only picking up like a little bit here and there, dude. Yeah. So it's funny to me when people think like, well, if I can't see it or hear it, or if I can't be, it doesn't exist. You're like, oh, really? Because that's what like that's what reality has taught us, dude. Is that like the world is only like absorbable through the five senses? No, dude. Wrong.
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there.
Right? So yeah, exactly. So like assigning meaning to these symbols is literally like the power of belief, right? Okay. It's a type of authority. It's the way that like authority is in the same way. You know what I mean? You have to believe that it has
or our money.
No, that was literally next on my list, dude. The fiat currency.
Right.
It's not backed by anything, dude. It's backed by how much bonds China owns, right? You know what I mean? It's nothing. There's no gold. There's no fucking, you know what I mean? Like the petrodollar, it's a joke, dude, right? And so freaking, we have put the system of belief into things: authority, currency, symbols, numbers, letters, all these things, right?
More so than fact.
Straight up, dude. Magic is just a lot of it is basically just a system of psychology. Okay. The technique and application of imagination. And some have called it like the science of the subconscious.
Okay.
So in addition to people that we're going to talk about here, there's a lot of people who can get like other people to respond in an anticipated way using like various external stimuli to control on the macro scale. It's like social engineering, right?
Yeah. Sociopaths.
Yeah. For real. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. And
my first relationship.
Yeah. Right. I think we're talking about this. Yeah, exactly. So some of these people, some of these like pioneers of the 20th century versions of magic are like Carl Jung, Edward Bernays, who I'm always gushing about. All these type of motherfuckers, these are magicians, dog. These are like straight up.
In that sense, yeah.
In that sense. Exactly, dude. A lot of the times, dude, also magic gets a bad rap from like traditional science and academia as being like woo-woo, as we talked about before. The scientific approach tends to tell us that like if it cannot be observed and it cannot be measured, then it doesn't exist. Yeah. Exactly. Like we were just talking about a second ago, right? Which obviously not true. Like we're just saying, you know, a lot of the time, like I was just saying, people are completely unaware of this information field that we're walking around in. Like for fuck's sake, like what is a graviton? Or a photon, you know what I mean? Like these are things that like it's hard to wrap our brains around, quarks and shit like that, right? Yeah. And it's just like motherfucking magnets. How do they work? That's kind of basically my point in the sense of like explaining magic. Is that like a lot of people will be like woo woo, but it's at the same time it's like no, you are basically explaining parts that are magic. You just don't recognize it as such.
That paint isn't just blue. There's some greens in it.
Yeah, exactly. I can tell you why it's blue and why like the waves and shit like make it blue. Like. Next on the list is what word you mentioned before, Marcus, and that's called alchemy.
Oh, okay.
Alchemy is basically like an ancient branch of like natural philosophy, and there's like a philosophical and like proto-scientific traditional practice like through all over the place, like Europe, Africa, China. It was like the medieval forerunner of chemistry.
Right.
Based on the support and the transformation of matter. Yeah. It was concerned particularly with attempts to convert like base metals into like gold.
Right. Or metallurgy.
Exactly. Yeah. Or in some cases to find like some sort of universal elixir.
Right. Which turned out to be Uncle Johnny's snake oil.
Yeah. Which is delicious. And if you say anything bad about it in later.
Are you pregnant? This will solve that. Do you want to get pregnant? This will solve that.
Horny? Not horny? Fucking.
Too much money?
Not enough money? Proto Edward Bernays, fucking snake oil salesman. You need this because you're not complete enough. So later it would actually become something that I kind of think it gives it kind of better context, and that's the power to control natural forces through like a supernatural means, which basically just means change the world around you.
Right.
Right. Which again is just magic. Yeah. Next on the list is something called thelema. Heard of this at all?
Is that part of the female anatomy?
Yes, exactly. That's the inside the on the left side of the ovary. Is the thelema is what basically like fleshes out the no, that's not it at all. Thelema is like an esoteric and occult social or spiritual philosophy of like the new religious movements like that were developed in the 1900s, like the New Age movement. Actually was created by Aleister Crowley. Okay. It's a sort of religious movement that he created.
Right.
So the word thelema is the English translation of the Greek noun will. Okay. It's from the verb like to will or to wish or to want. It's purpose. And so Crowley basically asserted and believed himself to be a prophet of this new age called the Aeon of Horus, from Egyptian mythology. Horus, yeah. Based on a spiritual experience that he and his wife had in Egypt back in 1904. And by his account, evidently while inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, he had like a experience where like a possibly non-corporeal form like contacted him. Okay. And I guess subsequently dictated a text known as the Book of the Law.
Oh, I never heard of this.
Which outlined the principles of Thelema, his new religion, right? Right. And so I'm not going to get like deep into it.
Aleister Crowley was a prophet. Dum, 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 dum.
So I'm not going to go like too deep into Thelema because it's a whole freaking religion. You know what I mean? But basically some of the three statements in particular that distill like the practices and ethics of Thelema kind of down to its core like beliefs. And that's the saying of do what thou wilt. You've heard of that? Yeah. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, meaning that the adherents of the Thelema should seek out and follow their true path, i.e. find, or determine what their true will is. And a lot of people think that, do what thou will means just do whatever you want. And don't worry about the consequences, right? But that's just kind of like a intellectually lazy way of looking at it. You know what I mean? Right. Basically, do what thou wilt, not do as thou wilt. You know what I mean? It's a slight difference, but it means all the difference in the world, dude.
Right. Got to find your purpose, your calling.
Literally, exactly, and then stay true to that, right? And so it basically it's because otherwise, if you're not being true to yourself, what are you doing? You're just,
know thyself.
Just jerking it off, right? Yeah, exactly. You're just fucking wasting time, dude. Yeah, exactly. And it has a lot of kind of relation to like what you hear in the Bible or whatever, or the Lord's Prayer, which is like "Thy will be done." Right. Exactly the same, dude. And in this particular case, will it's kind of like a substitute for intention, right? Okay. So will, the thing you're trying to do, right? Your will and your intention, that is equivalent to your potential. Okay. Okay. It goes back to like freaking science class and like chemistry and stuff when you're talking about like physics and stuff, talking about like potential energy versus kinetic energy, right? Sure. One is like built up, one is like in motion or whatever, right? Number 2, love is the law, love under will. Oh, okay. So, i.e., that means that the natural law of Thelema is love, but love is like itself is kind of like a subsidiary to finding and manifesting one's like authentic purpose, or your mission, I guess is another word that people say.
So if she's in your way, you got to dump her.
You got to get her. You got to get rid of that, dude. Just because she doesn't understand, guys. You know what I mean? It's fucking say sometimes, she might come back around eventually and be like, you know what? I just didn't understand. I was just kind of insecure at the time. And then, if you take it after yourself, you're going to take her back or not. That's up to you. And so finally, every man and every woman is a star. Everybody is a star. Right, dude? Which is to say that in the 20th century era of, cosmology, it's kind of like implied as to be like a metaphor that persons that are doing their will are like stars in the universe, occupying a time and position in space that's unique to everybody else or whatever, yet distinctly individual and having an independent nature, kind of largely like without undue conflict of other stars or whatever, basically. Okay, right. Yeah. So yeah. Your will is your own, and doesn't have anything to do with other people, basically.
Right. Interesting.
We are all a snowflake, perfect little snowflake. Or like Tyler Durden's speech, "You are not a perfect fuckingly formed snowflake."
I was thinking this is the opposite of like no man is an island.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, pretty much. Well, no. This is every man is an island. Yet we are all out on the ocean alone together. Right. In a kind of weird like way. So anyway, aspects of Thelema and like Crowley's thoughts in general kind of inspired the development of Wicca. Okay, right. Which I'm sure lots of people are familiar with or whatever, right. Which is kind of like a pagan-y, to a certain degree, the rise of modern paganism as a whole can kind of be attributed to Crowley. Sure. Yeah, as well as the whole concept of chaos magic and some variations even actually of Satanism, which we're going to be talking about today. So again, call back to the MK Ultra 2 episode where we're discussing Colonel Michael Aquino and his whole psychological operations thing, head of psychological warfare division at the army, right? And also a member of the Church of Satan, and then later became the head founding member of the Temple of Set, right? Another Egyptian god, right? And like with all things, a lot of these terms are preloaded, right? Sure. So finally, what we're going to talk about is something called natural law. Okay. Have you heard about this at all?
I've heard of natural law, but I'm wondering what it means in this context.
Word. So it's probably going to be similar to what you've like heard of before. Okay. So we live in an objective universe, yeah, that is formed and like governed by this thing called natural law, right? All the physical things that surround us, matter and energy and fucking time and space, and all the like things that like work in what we call reality, you know, the atoms, the molecules, all these things behave in a certain way and do not stray from their functions, right?
Right.
Okay. Otherwise, there would just be like chaos all the time, right?
Right.
And, you know, up would be down, black would be white, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There'd be no standards of consistency.
Right.
Of our reality, right? Of our tangible reality. I heard a really good analogy from Michael Aquino, actually, talking about how, you know, a tree is a tree and will always be a tree and won't just all of a sudden turn into, in his words, like an Irish setter for any reason.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So natural law is binding and unbreakable. Okay. It's an ironclad universal standard that is applied consistently to what we consider reality. Okay.
Right.
And so, for instance, why should things stay consistent and mandatory from one moment to the next? You know what I mean? Have you ever even asked yourself that question?
Why don't things just
Why don't things just fucking change or whatever, right? You know what I mean? Like, well, because it's always like that. Why?
Because Thanos hasn't gotten his hands on the reality stone.
He needs the last stone, right? Yeah. Exactly. Worshipping something that is eternal and immutable and omnipresent, that, for all intents and purposes, is God.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. That makes perfect sense, right?
Right. In all things. Yeah.
Exactly. So that immutable force that binds everything together, that governs this like Lego set of
our reality.
Our reality is what is called God or gods.
Yeah.
Okay. And in fact, in the Egyptian mythology or whatever, they were called the Neteru.
Okay.
They're like galactic, like custodians.
Right.
Like galactic, like engineers that helped like keep everything, all the levers pulled in the right like order and stuff like that. They keep the universe operational, right?
The Watchers.
Exactly. Yeah, for real, dude. They keep the standard enforced, okay?
Yeah.
And actually, we're going to talk about like a lot of Egyptian stuff or whatever, because like Crowley and that Colonel Aquino dude were just balls deep in that kind of thing.
Sometimes literally.
Yeah. So true, dude. Well played, sir. So what's kind of weird about this is using words like facts or logic, or even terms like the scientific method.
They're a little sticky with this.
Yes, dude, because those, if you think about it, those are just merely tools of like comparing and contrasting natural law.
Right.
Things that exist already that we're like comparing and contrasting to, right?
Okay.
So you can use natural law to figure out different aspects of itself and how they relate to each other, right? One cannot do that thing when they're evaluating human consciousness.
Right.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or the soul, right?
Yeah.
Some people fucking want to say, right?
Right.
And how they relate to each other because we are external to it, dude.
Right. Yeah. Of course.
That is what makes it all so difficult, dude. Okay. Yeah. And so that is what because we're operating within the realm of like creative intuition, there are no such immutable laws, right? In fact, it's the opposite. Imagination is the
absence of that natural
yes,
order,
exactly. Is creativity is boundless, right?
It's this miasma that
we have
exactly formless.
Yes, dude, but like infinite too.
Yeah,
and so this is what makes it so tricky about this whole goddamn thing to articulate, because we can't say A plus B equals C, right? Because we're making up our own fucking A's and B's and C's because we're using our own symbology and symbolism and shit to assign meaning and value to these things, right?
Right.
So you with me so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like talking about quantum physics without having the ability
pretty
to look
much,
at
dude.
particles.
Yes, exactly, dude.
Yeah.
And trying to like use those words or try to use words that people can be like, okay, I think I know what you're saying. So because we can't like hang our problems up on any externality that we have to take 100% responsibility for in our lives, right? That responsibility frightens a lot of people, dude.
Absolutely.
Because you're alone, right? And you're cast adrift without any basis to stand on, dude.
Right.
Well, evidently it's like the first step in Western enlightenment to kind of accept that like you are separate from this objective reality, that you yourself are in it, but not of it.
Right.
That's another like biblical fucking thing that a lot of people fucking say, right?
Right.
A lot of people kind of misconstrue the violation of natural law as like a miracle. Right?
Oh.
So, to be that the existence of God or gods in an ancient religion actually, prayed for these violations of law, right? Walking on the water,
right?
The walls of Jericho falling,
right?
100 different things. Red Sea parting. That's like a big one. For real, this is like where the concept of like kind of good and evil kind of comes from, right? Because these are the interpretations of humans, right? These concepts don't exist in the objective world. You know what I mean? Human beings put that value or disvalue onto that concept, right?
Okay. And they themselves assign it good or evil is what you're saying?
Yes, basically. Okay. We look at certain things and say, hey, that's good. Hey, that's evil, right? Mm-hmm. This is actually a major point of contention between like Satanists and everybody else is this kind of moral relativism, dude.
Right.
I think I've talked to you about this before or whatever when we were talking about our Freemason episode, I think. I'm reminded of that K-Pax documentary with Jeff Bridges and Kevin Spacey, where he's basically talking about how like every sentient being in the universe knows the difference between right and wrong, right? You don't need like a law to tell you that, right? Usually. Right. And this is also a major point of contention between like a lot of major philosophers. Where does our concept of morality come from?
Right.
How was it even formed as a society? Is it the natural outcome of like a maturing and evolving
Is it nature
species?
Or nurture? Yeah.
Exactly.
If you were to take a person who never lived with other people, put them in the jungle and come back and say, hey, what you're doing is wrong.
Would they have the same moral things as you would have, basically, right? And that's a lot of kind of major point in contention between, I can't remember what the names of the two like positions are, but basically it's like the
tabula rasa.
Pure logic, like pure evolution of logic argument versus like the Judeo-Christian argument of Sam Harris versus like freaking Jordan Peterson or one of those guys, where basically one of them saying like, well, it was just a natural development that we would develop what we call today morality, where another guy was like, well, no, because morality is kind of antithetical to our survival instincts. Yeah. You know what I mean? Why would I want to share or do things that are not exactly directly positive
for just me?
You know what I mean? Like
it's not purely a survival thing.
Yeah, exactly. But then
it's not in this personal sense.
Exactly. But people like Sam Harris would be like, well, no. Well, after if you get to think about things eventually, further on down the road, you'll realize that maybe it's a detriment to you right now by sharing your food. It's like a general positive. You know what I mean? And it's back and forth. And where does that come from? Right?
Yeah.
Human beings, to some degree, are kind of blank slates. Like again, we're talking about that in our MK Ultra episode, where we're talking about these social engineers who think that like. What was his name?
Just a mold that we can
Lord,
shape.
What's his name? Yeah, exactly. You can, if you just pour the right stimuli in, you get the right equation out. You know what I mean? Which
it's like Play-Doh.
It's unfortunate, but you just squeeze it and it squeezes whatever through whatever like thing.
Okay, crescent moon. Crescent moon.
Star. And what's depressing is in a lot of ways they're totally right, dude. And there's even scientific evidence to back up that they're right. But every now and again, like the Matrix or like Jesus or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Or like the Buddha, you have these people that don't fucking fit, dude. And they break they're the exception to the rule.
Right.
And therefore they
outliers.
they prove that you can't actually squeeze people into these little fucking boxes and expect them to just react exactly how you thought they were.
Right.
Human beings aren't a goddamn scientific equation that can be, or a mathematical equation that can be just like crunched out or whatever with the same equation.
I would argue they're the ultimate variable.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. They're not an equation. They're a variable, dude. Thank you. As human beings, evidently, are unique because, or at least a lot of these people who believe in all this magical shit kind of believe that like human beings and like religious stuff too.
I don't know, dude. Have you ever been to Los Angeles? I mean, it's like one person over there.
You know what I mean? Freaking like, and they're all the same. Plasticky, fucking fake everything, fucking fake tits, fake ass, fake nose, fake lips, fake personality. Kind of in conjunction with a lot of these like mainstream religious beliefs, as well as a lot of people that believe in like magic and stuff, is that human beings are like unique. Well, evidently are unique because we are conscious individuals in this natural law system operating seemingly independent of it. Right.
Okay.
I heard this worded pretty well. Was this, we are a particularization principle of conscious isolation, which which basically just means a particularized principle, which just basically means like an idea, a very unique and specific individual idea operating in isolation of anything else, right? Mm-hmm. And so like using our physical bodies and our five senses to explore this environment, this objective universe, right? I think David Icke calls it a being of infinite consciousness having a 5 sense experience.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Infinite being in a meat suit, basically, is kind of what the general term of all this is. So, human beings are kind of considered divine because they're not held to this standard, but rather they can change it, dude.
Right.
So that's why, like in the Bible, angels and demons are jealous of humans because we have free will. Right? And godlike creativity, right? And so, which they do not, evidently. Like in that religious documentary Dogma that I had you watch. Yeah, totally. Where like Bartleby is like arguing with Loki in the parking lot, right? About freaking how he's like, like
all the shit that he
gave them everything. Yeah, exactly. He showed them infinite fucking patience or whatever. And like they threw it all away. And and in spite of it all, some of them don't even choose to believe he exists. Yeah. You know what I mean? And he's just like, if we could ignore the pain like they do, we could just ignore it or whatever, but we can't. Like, you know what I mean? Our life was a life of like bowing and scraping and servitude and devotion or whatever. And he's like, and they get to choose like to tell him to go fuck himself, basically. You know what I mean? And he's like jealous of that, right? Yeah. And so evidently that's going to be like a main theme, is that like, that's the reason why these like entities, quote unquote, reach out to human beings, dude, is because they're different in a way that makes them curious to be like, oh, let's just see if this or that or whatever. You know what I mean? Like if you came across like a freaking first native or whatever it's called, people have like never been contacted, you know what I mean, by like quote unquote Western civilization or whatever, first world civilization, you'd have a lot of like questions and things. You'd be like, dude, I want to ask him this. I want to talk about this. I want to fuck with him on this. See if he fucking, see if he reacts this way.
Do the thumb and the middle finger thing.
Yeah, totally right. Oh my God. How can you take his thumb and remove it? Yeah, I went back and saw the miracles of Jesus. Turns out it wasn't all that great. So human consciousness basically takes views and positions that are in violation of this natural law, right? Human beings can kind of conceive of things.
We have the power of imagination.
Exactly. Not violating of the laws, but kind of rearranging them in ways that wouldn't, that they wouldn't do themselves or whatever. So again, like the tree analogy, it's not going to become an Irish setter, but
in our mind,
we can take it. Well, not just in our mind, we can make an Irish setter. In physical reality, we can make that chair into a fucking table or something, right? For instance, or whatever, or 100 other things, right? We can shape our reality in ways that reality itself couldn't do without us there.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, again, so natural law tells us that like the tree will remain a tree, or whatever, but humans can, for instance, like I said, fashion it into a table. So again, according to that Colonel Aquino guy, that separation that is outside of God is called Satan.
Okay.
Or Set, as he fucking decides to fucking call it or whatever.
Okay.
Which again is why a lot of people would freak out about that.
Yeah,
so like, it's separate from God. Like, yeah, exactly. Right. Totally. There's a really good, animated show of Dracula on Netflix. I don't know if you ever saw it. It's like 2 seasons. Each season only has like 3 episodes. I highly recommend watching it. It's really good. There's this fucking scene where like Dracula's girlfriend, who's like a human, is like doing some stuff, and a bunch of like nosy clergy buttholes fucking who are like all like, organized crime butt fucks basically. Yeah. Cause that's at that point where the clergy like is, God basically. And they go in to confront her or whatever. And on like the things that she's doing on like the ceremonies or whatever that she's doing or whatever. And she's like, no, you're mistaken. This has nothing to do with God. And then they're like, nothing to do with God. And she's like, no, you fucking idiots. Like, God damn it. That's not what I meant. Like, and then they're like burning her at the stake and like to bring Dracula. Fucking, yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly. Right. As you do with heretics.
Thou shalt not kill unless it's in the service of the church.
Then it's totally fine. Yeah, exactly. Totally. Like, well, I mean, yeah. So anyway, that kind of concept is going to be really the main reason why when people say certain things like he's a Satanist or he's a this or a that, a lot of people are like, oh, they mean like, oh, he probably drinks blood and fucking, murders children and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. There probably are some Satanists that fucking do that, dude. I'm not going to lie. But in the, different ceremonies have different things, I'm sure. You know what I mean? But in the sense, and this is
on your fire and such.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. From our Bohemian Grove episode. Exactly. So some people have different like understandings of what they mean or whatever. And though some of them might be true, just because one person is one thing doesn't necessarily mean all these other things. Right. Okay. So man's law versus nature's law is one thing I wanted to kind of touch on real quick, how there's like major differences. these are different systems, right? With different consequences for violating that law. Okay. Right. So for instance, freaking when, essentially that little like dogma clip when he was talking about, I don't know if you ever saw the movie though, did you?
Unfortunately, no. I keep
really
wanting to watch it, but I haven't found it. Yeah.
So those are two angels that are banished to Earth.
Right.
And they have to spend all of eternity on fucking Earth forever, right? Because they fucked up, right?
Yeah, they're fallen, yeah.
Exactly. Basically, they kind of figure out a way to cheat God, but because God is infallible and the entire existence of reality is based on God's infallibility to ensure the continuation of the system and shit, the enforcement of the system, what we're talking about, natural law.
It will correct itself.
Exactly. If they violate it so they can get back into heaven, it'll actually wipe out existence. And, matter of fact, this one demon is all like fucking who goes to help these two angels do that shit. And this one guy like questions him. He's like, why the fuck would you do that, dude? Whatever. He's like, bro, have you been to hell? He's like, well, no. He's like, bro, I'd rather not exist than fucking go back there, dude. So I'm going to help these guys do that shit, undo God's law and unravel all of reality. Right.
Yeah.
It was a different kind of consequence for natural law, you know, of breaking natural law than it is for breaking man's law.
Yeah.
And my analogy for breaking man's law is like the crosswalk analogy.
Okay, right.
Where you're not allowed to like cross the crosswalk if somebody's crossing, but you could.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, for instance, why would you talk shit to somebody if you're walking across the street and somebody like honks at you to walk faster and you just stop in front of their car and flip them off and be like, fuck you, bro. And it's like, hey, they might be in the wrong, but guess what? They can also drop the fucking accelerator down on the floor and fucking turn you into mush, right? You know what I mean? That's, again, it's like man's law versus nature's law, right? You know, it's a lot of times people will blame God for like, for instance, like bad crops.
When the Mets lose.
Yeah, for real, dude. Right. When the Yankees didn't fucking get it in a 3 1/4. So rather than just seeing bad crops as like a result of an unknown variable in an equation that you just didn't see, it wasn't God punishing you. It was just that you were too fucking dumb to realize that you weren't supposed to like plant the crop in fucking December or whatever it is, right?
Thanks, Obama.
Yeah. Okay, so finally, we're done with terms, but I just want to kind of briefly talk about like why magic.
Okay.
Like why, what does it matter? Who gives a shit, right? So to explore the true nature and meaning of consciousness is why magic. It's to peel back all those external things that make up our identity so that it can leave only like the purest parts of what you would call the soul.
Okay.
So, stripping away all those layers, leaving like the real you, the real individual you. And some have even called this actually the Holy Grail or telos.
Okay.
Which is, I guess, one's ultimate objective or aim is one's telos.
Okay. Is that a Latin word?
It probably is. It might be Greek though. Cause fucking, you know, a lot of these terms come from that, but maybe it's Latin. Basically, you're this creator God being.
All right. So in this scene, you're a creator God, right?
Did you ever see, Grandma's Boy?
No.
This dude's like a video game developer and he's a big stoner and he's like fucking developing this game and he's hanging out at his grandma's house and he's having her play like his beta version of the game or whatever. And he's like a demon that's like fucking, and it's just like, she's like, okay, what am I doing here? He's like, oh, so you're like a demon that's been summoned from hell to clear out this meth lab. And she's like, oh, violence is wrong, but drugs are bad. But like, you know, and then he fucking goes and starts murking all these fucking like gangbangers and shit, dude. It's fucking hilarious. So funny. Basically, you're like this creator God, this God being, not just particularly in like the physical or objective universe, but like straight up generating and alternating it.
Okay, right.
Okay, right. As we said before, like literally creating your own reality, magic, right? The main crux is basically differential in knowledge basically leads to like a differential in power, right?
Okay.
If you have this gap here, we cannot have a knowledge gap. Yeah, exactly. If you control institutions and you control information, like the education system, the religious system, the entertainment system, the media system, if you can fiddle with all these things, you can mess with how information is delivered to people, right? Yeah. And you can basically get people to, believe one thing or another, right? Okay. Right. So this is where the concept of like the priest class comes in, right? We've kind of talked about this before. Yeah. Hidden knowledge, right? This knowledge differential is like a game. If you know all the rules, then you have an advantage.
Sure.
Right?
I didn't know I could swap my pawn out for a piece.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't tell me that.
Again, it's a callback to our Secret Society episode. It's like that historical documentary that was directed by Mel Gibson called Apocalypto. where they had all these priest guys that were sitting at the top of the pyramid, and hanging out with the royalty, ripping fucking still beating hearts out of the chests of like slaves, basically, and, asking the sky if they approve. And if they do, then they should sow a sign. And then miraculously, the sun is blocked out by like a solar eclipse, right? Well, obviously these guys knew it was going to happen and didn't tell all the, the unwoke masses, right? Uh-huh. And so benefits of this kind of covert control far outweigh overt control. As we were just talking about before, the amount of energy that it takes to like get people, like to enslave other people basically is not a 1-for-1. It's like a 2-for-1.
Right.
It's very wasteful, right? Yeah. The amount of resources, the attention, the time, like I said before, that was the whole concept born out of the psychological warfare and psychological operations concept to be able to get your enemy to convince your enemy not to fight.
Yeah, to put that rock down.
Exactly. Go back to work. So anyway, its importance of this knowledge and folding it into the aspects of everyday life that is so crucial.
Yeah.
Right?
Shut up and stay on Facebook and just buy stuff.
Yeah, pay attention to dumb shit that's not going to help you out in any way, shape, or form. What are the Kardashians doing? I want to kind of go into some really brief history about magic in general, or actually not magic in general, because that could freaking, that goes back forever, right? Mm-hmm. Like Sumerian times even. Like, we're going to actually touch on something very specific, and we're only going to touch on this because it kind of has relation to what we're going to discuss here in the body of this episode.
Ooh, okay.
In the smooth, way back sensual body. So yeah, let's go back to the Age of Enlightenment, also known as the Age of Reason. Basically, this is like an intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated the world of ideas in Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries or whatever. The Enlightenment included like a range of ideas that were centered on like the sovereignty of reason and the evidence of the senses as like the primary. Yeah, exactly. It's a primary source of knowledge and advancement of ideals such as like liberty, tolerance, fraternity, constitutional government, separation of church and state, all the good shit, right?
Right.
Matter of fact, again, this is a callback to our Secret Society episode where we talked about the Illuminati and the Freemasons are like the goal of the Bavarian Illuminati, who during this time who tried to infiltrate the Freemasons, right? Yeah. And basically, and other secret societies to kind of take the king and the clergy down a peg, and replace everything with kind of self-governance, right?
Right.
Enter this dude named John Dee. You ever heard of this guy?
Yes.
Have you? Yes. That sounded like you were not very confident, Marcus. Don't lie to me.
I want to sound smart, okay?
Well, it doesn't take much for me. Fucking, I'll be like, oh my God, that sounds right. This dude was like a Welsh mathematician. He was an astronomer, an astrologer, occultist, alchemist, bon vivant. He was a court astronomer and advisor to Queen Elizabeth I.
Okay.
This was back in like the late 1500s.
Right.
So he spent much of his time on alchemy, what we talked about before, right?
Yeah.
Which is like a division of heretic philosophy, right? Relating to the ancient occult tradition, kind of encompassing alchemy, astrology, and theosophy. Okay. Basically, as a political advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, he would use these practices like astrology to kind of do things like consummate her coronation and other important like royal events to like coincide with
celestial events.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. He advocated for like the founding of the whole concept of English colonies in the New World, right?
Mm.
He literally, with Elizabeth and throughout this like magical crap, created the English Empire, dude.
Mm.
And matter of fact, the whole British Empire was a term that was credited. That he was credited with coining, and that like the whole concept of the sun never setting, yeah, and so forth. So he basically made England the empire he was known for, and he basically got all of these like step by step how to build an empire step by step through these like contacts, dude. Like, okay, so these like spiritual extra dimensional contacts, right?
Right.
So basically, this dude sought to contact spirits through the use of something called a scryer,
right?
Which is basically like a crystal gazer,
yeah.
Right? Which he thought would act as like an intermediary, like a medium between himself and these things that he called angels,
right?
Okay, like these extra dimensional beings, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Dee's first attempts with several of these scryers was like unsatisfactory, but I guess like in 1582 he met this dude named Edward Kelly.
Okay.
Who he had an alias at the time to disguise that he was convicted of coining or forging.
Oh.
So this dude was kind of on the lam already. Kelly, I guess, impressed him so greatly with his abilities that Dee kind of like took him under his wing and took him into the service and began to like devote all of his energies to the like supernatural pursuits. Okay. He would have these things called like spiritual conferences with these beings. Okay. That were conducted with these intense, Christian piety, right? He would always like purify himself afterward because he was a Christian. Yeah.
Sure.
Purify himself afterward and like you tons of prayer and fasting and stuff to kind of cleanse himself of what he thought some parts of these things were kind of spiritually like dirty.
Right. Don't play with a Ouija board.
Right. Totally. He was convinced that this knowledge and advancement that he could bring to all of mankind and Elizabeth specifically through contacting these like entities. Yeah.
Sure.
So Dee's practices straddled magic and modern science. Okay. And in the sense that he wanted to kind of reproduce results at a consistent like rate, basically, right? So
he wanted to be scientific about his spiritual.
Yes, dude, exactly. Precisely. Thank you. So in 1587 at one of these like spiritual conferences in Bohemia, Kelly told Dee that the angel Uriel had ordered that the men share all their possessions, okay? Including their wives.
Oh, of course. Here we go.
As these stories often go. So the order for like wife sharing caused Dee some anguish, as you do.
Yeah.
But he
didn't want to be a cook.
Yeah, exactly. Totally, dude. He was a little too proud. He apparently didn't doubt that it was like genuine. So he kind of apprehensively acquiesced to like the whole wife swapping fucking 19 swinging 70s fucking thing.
And I'm sure in these times the wife didn't have any sort of say so.
Oh no, totally. They're basically property, right? Yeah. So, however, Dee broke off the conference, let's say, immediately afterward or whatever. Yeah, totally.
He hung up on those angels.
Yeah, exactly.
He ghosted them.
Mid orgy was like, all right, let's turn this off. So 9 months later, on the 28th of February in 1588, a son was born to Dee's wife. Okay. So, who Dee,
so they went on the Maury Povich show.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You are the father. Dee baptized his son and raised him as his own, though he may have been Kelly's for sure, right? As was Dee was 60 at the time and Kelly was 32.
Oh, jeez.
So it's probably his, right?
Well, see, she was on top again. We talked
exactly
about this,
the whole gravity thing. That's true. Good call. Oh, you could do a whole freaking episode on all that stuff with Dee and Kelly and Queen Elizabeth, right? But I only mentioned it briefly and a couple of key, like cherry picked, like parts of it because it's going to be relevant to the main body of what we're going to talk about later, right?
History will repeat itself.
I mean, maybe. I mean, it happens sometimes. I mean, it might not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes.
It rhymes.
So as I just said, like in all things, I'm going to be generalizing a lot of this like information. I've cherry picked a lot of this information, right?
Sure.
I'm not here to give a whole biography on these guys that we're going to be talking about, right? So if it sounds like I'm praising them, don't, or even disparaging them, I'm not giving my opinion, dude, on the person, if a person's like good or bad. These are like many things.
These are the facts as we know them.
Yeah, basically, dude. Like, and so, people are complex, right? You know what I mean? Like, again, that's we're talking about that whole, like, can you separate the art from the artist kind of a thing, right? And it's like, yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, whatever your opinion on these people morally, it's certainly a fascinating story.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. All these dudes that we're going to talk about now are part of something that is not. It's basically kind of called the Gnostic revival.
Okay.
So, first and foremost, the most wicked man in the world, Aleister Crowley.
Mr. Crowley.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, exactly.
I was waiting for you.
Do you know anything about that guy? Other than like one day when I was driving home late at night, freaking from one of my schooling events, like I decided to call you and like shout your ear off about Aleister Crowley for some reason.
Crowley? Oh, okay, we're talking about. I wasn't sure if you were talking about Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh, well, he's awesome too, but you know what I mean, the chicken heads and such.
Yeah,
but no, with Crowley, like, what do you know about?
Talk
Crowley?
About what I heard about him.
Yes, because like with all things, I want to know, like, where you first heard about him. What do you know about him? Like, where do you get those opinions?
Yeah, he had all these crazy ideas, and he gained like a following because he was sort of like he was a
long-haired hippie that had a lot of crazy ideas about mankind and brotherly love. It's called Todd, and he's dating my mom.
Yeah, he and who's the Rocket Man?
Oh,
Elton John.
Okay. Yes, exactly. Jack Parsons.
Jack Parsons, yes.
We're going to be talking about him too, bro.
Yeah, was one of his fans.
That's hilarious.
And then there was I don't want to get any spoilers here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was like, Jack Parsons was doing his thing and like giving money and giving kickbacks back to Crowley because Crowley was like, but even Jack Parsons took it in a way, I guess, that was like a little bit too far for Crowley because they were having correspondence and Crowley's like, I don't know about the things you're doing over there, dude, because it's like taking my shit and like running with it.
Yeah, totally.
But
yeah, we're totally going to talk about that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't know anything about Jack Parsons when I fucking heard about Crowley.
Yeah.
I heard about Crowley through like rock and roll.
Oh, okay, right.
Through like Led Zeppelin.
Sure, I'm sure
and
a lot of people.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was Robert Plant or Jimmy Page, but one of them, or maybe it could have even been like Bonham or whatever. Yeah, somebody. One of them fucking bought Crowley's house in England, or even him being in the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper.
Oh yeah.
And so I would only like know about Crowley through that, or through about how religious people would like talk about him or whatever. Demonize the shit out of this guy, call him the most wicked man in the world and the beast and all this shit or whatever. You know what I mean? The most evil man ever and all this stuff or whatever. So, I didn't really know anything about him. Only slowly over time that I and I had to be in a proper spot mentally in life to even listen to what somebody was going to say. Because, dude, if you've been told something your whole life, I mean, this is kind of bombastic, but like, let's just say, for instance, like if somebody was raised in like some racist household or whatever, where they're told this one thing their whole fucking life, and that's their whole, like you were saying, that room analogy with, that movie. If you think a thing and it's reinforced your whole life, and then you come up with like a contradictory piece of evidence, your brain doesn't necessarily like accept it right away. Yeah, exactly. Your brain has like a shutdown. It's like, cannot compute. Nope. Double think, dude. So, exactly. And so I think a lot of people are like that when it comes to Crowley or with the occult or with magic in general.
Yeah.
So with that,
particularly if you live in a Western, predominantly Christian society,
100%, dude, 100%, and especially with the whole Christian aspect is because a lot of organized religions will try to shit on Crowley and people of his ilk, not only because he was kind of like a really like edgy fucking figure and did a lot of weird, not awesome shit. Like, again, I'm not trying to like defend anybody. It's like we were talking about that January 6th episode. It's like, I'm not trying to defend. I'm just trying to like objectively look at things. Like just because Crowley did some things or whatever, like doesn't mean he's like a good person. And just because he did some other things doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad person. Now, granted, when you look in through his life, you see some of the things that he did to other people. You're like, whoa, you're a fucking piece of shit, dude. Like, but I'm not talking about that. We're talking about the like philosophical and spiritual practices that he tried to pursue.
Right.
In that vein, Aleister Crowley was basically an English occultist, right? He was a poet, an explorer, a scientist, kind of, and possibly a double agent, a spy, even writing inflammatory propaganda during World War I, campaigning for the German war effort against Britain.
Oh, nice.
But it turns out, presumably, that he was assisting the British intelligence and writing a newspaper called Zafasaland. And furthermore, it is suspected that the concept of the sinking of the Lusitania to get America into the war was originated from Crowley. How weird, right? Freaking flashback to our freaking our operations episode, I think, right? Or maybe it was fake news episode. Yeah, there we go. There's so many now. We have so many.
Remember? I remember.
So,
it was fantastic.
Remember Banthas? Crowley was also possibly straight up the first troll. like no joke. Like this motherfucker was a straight trickster, was proudly responsible for like many hoaxes. Okay.
For the lulz.
Yeah, totally. He was consistently playing games and you would never know if Crowley was like being serious or whatever, right? This like attitude always reflected him personally and in his literary writings. Okay.
I believe there's pictures of him as a boy. He always wore a striped shirt and he had like a slingshot back in his pocket.
Dennis the Malthusian Menace, I believe. Crowley was also a mountaineer, attempting to climb K2 and then didn't actually make it. Things went like terribly wrong, I guess, on that trip. But the concept of being a mountaineer, I think, is an interesting analogy because it kind of has to do with people like achieving, like ascending new heights.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. Right. With great difficulty, right? Yeah. Raising their like level of consciousness with each, new level, gaining more, perception.
Right.
Right. More perspective. And people at the top are illuminated, right, with this knowledge and experience of like the climbing the mountain and seeing this new perspective, while the people at the bottom or at the base reality, which is why they call that, remain in like a state of materialistic illusion.
Yeah,
right?
they can't see the top. They have no idea.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. And that's like a very much a callback again for like the 100th time to our Secret Society episode, where that's the whole reason of the Secret Society is so you can kind of cloister this knowledge and level up personally, right? To a different level than everybody else, presumably, right?
Yeah.
So born Edward Aleister Crowley in October of 1875, his parents were like super religious fundamentalists, right? Who believed in, who believed that the Bible was like literally the word of God, right? Just like written through human hands or whatever, right? This was all during like the New Age, right? In the 19th century, where a lot of like social dynamics were changing, specifically this concept of like the will of God, right? This concept of the will of God is being challenged in the sense of like that you don't need a willful deity if you have an established law. Again, it's that thing I was talking about with like, it's not like a pissed off God. It's just that these variables that you don't understand of natural law that you just don't understand. So again, for example, like plagues or earthquakes or other acts of God were not examples of God's anger necessarily or punishments, but rather just the cause of like a natural formulaic outcome of a set of like equations.
Is this the same? That's interesting. Is this the same type of philosophy of like, yeah, we believe in creationism, but like basically God just like said it and forget it?
Yes, exactly. Like somebody created natural law and then just like tapped out and let it kind of go on with itself. That's kind of what I believe too, to be honest.
They spun the top and they just
left and walked off and then went and fucking created other tops in other like dimensions, right?
I don't have time for your top. I got these tops.
Your top's spinning. I got to make this one. This top's not even fucking made yet, dude. Fucking, you want me to come over here when your top is spinning, when this top hasn't even been made yet, let alone started spinning? What's wrong with you? Selfish. After his father, who was like a preacher, died and was left, he left Aleister with like a small fortune. This basically allowed him all the comforts of not having to worry about the things like, rent and food and shit, right?
Yeah, so he can focus on his philosophy.
Exactly. He now has the freedom to do all that. Exactly, right? And so now he can experiment with life and consciousness as he sees fit, right?
Right.
So he can now indulge in these interests and become a scholar of the occult and study the interests that want him or whatever. So he basically became part of like this scientific revolution that was born out of using a traditionally Western scientific like approach to studying these weird ancient like mystery schools, because again he wanted to apply it and develop the mind and the consciousness, trying to achieve a consistent result that any magician could reproduce if they followed the proper steps. Kind of like what we were saying earlier.
Being scientific about his magic.
Exactly. Being objective about woo-woo. And of course, any interest in magic is going to draw the ire from like religious establishments, right? Especially during this time when people are not exactly super tolerant, let's say, of like religious dissent.
Right.
Especially if he was saying blasphemous thing or what they would consider blasphemous things, right? So you don't, for instance, he would say things like, you don't need the church or priests to speak to God. Yeah. Which is hilarious because that's a pretty common thing to know now, you know what I mean? Or whatever. And so, but back then it was very like, oh my. So in their minds, he was like the straight up devil because he was like undermining the historical faith in the church as like a threat to their authority, a direct threat to their authority, right? Yeah. And so that's why they kind of gave him all these like jacked up like names and titles, which he totally leaned into. You know what I mean? Nice. This again, like a troll. He was like, "Fuck you," like calling himself the Beast and referencing the Book of Revelations and Bible of 666 and all that stuff, whatever. And
going down the street, going, "Boo!"
Yeah, exactly. The hell's wrong with you? Those days are over. The Dave Chappelle joke. Fucking no scaring these people in DC anymore. I tried. Fucking walked up and boo. Fuck is wrong with you? Looking at him all like indignant, like you may have been able to get me a while ago, but I'm wise to that shit. So as I mentioned, it seemed like Crowley was interested in like this new kind of religion, right? Which would be like kind of scientific in nature and replicable and genuine and true to like the nature of man. He felt that Christianity was straight up outmoded and shown to be like completely unable to combat like modern science. I mean, at least in the sense that it was being taught in the churches, right? Right. For instance, you know what I mean? Because like, I don't necessarily consider all the shit that they were teaching in the churches, or whatever, to be the true sense of like Christianity or whatever. You know what I mean? Like with everything, if it gets corporatized and it gets watered down and perverted and all this nonsense, right?
Right. Interpreted through whoever the local
Exactly.
clergy was.
And they have their own, agenda rather, you know what I mean? And so even if they're not aware of it, even if the subconscious is like taking over going like, say these things.
Right.
So some would have just like hide from the science and saying that like, well, like science is science, but religion is religion, right? You know what I mean? Because they can't like stand up to like the modern, scrutiny of science, right? But like Crowley believed that they would be one and the same because the issue is truth, capital T truth, right? As established natural laws as like the basis of life in the universe. And the law has to be totally constant, consistent, not subject to interpretation, dude, by the clergy specifically, as we were just saying, right? In that spirit, Crowley developed his famous mantra, do what thou will, which we were just talking about, right? And again, it doesn't mean that like, do whatever you want and damn the consequences or whatever. It's just like trying to find who you are as a person and then be true to that and pursue that. Right. So he apparently received all of this like information from like different spirits. Angels. Exactly. Yeah, totally. Right. Most infamous of all of in the Great Pyramid, like we spoke before or whatever, kind of in the similar sense of like John Dee and Ed Kelly in the transcribing other things. So there in the pyramid, he transcribed something called the Book of the Law, right? As we talked about kind of earlier. And this is like a central sacred text of Thelema, which is that religion we talked about that he created, that was allegedly written down from dictation that he claimed by a being that was calling himself Aiwas. And I guess there's 3 chapters that are largely written first person by like 3 additional like deities, I guess.
May I ask how that's spelled?
Of course. It's Aiwass.
Oh, okay.
Very Egyptian. Aiwas.
Gotcha. I think I had some speakers that had that on that one too.
Those are really good. Like those 12s and those tweeters that come with it. So Crowley knew that all of these entities that he would invoke were merely like projections of different parts of himself, dude. His psyche, right? He never trusted any of these things because he didn't know necessarily
where it was coming
from, dude. And he knew that a lot of these like fuckers were tricksters, right?
Right.
And not to be trusted, right? And evidently this is going to be a main theme that's common sense among magicians.
Okay.
Where basically if you read anything about magic and like incantations and like summonings and shit like that or whatever, anything that's evidently worth its weight or whatever in salt would be telling you that like, hey, this is fire. Fire reacts in X, Y, and Z ways.
It's fire. It's cool, man.
Yeah, it's dope as fuck. But also it'll burn your whole goddamn house down if you're not like, careful and stuff like that. And so that, again, that's going to be like a common theme or whatever of like whatever information you're getting from like, quote, the other side, don't necessarily trust it. Like what happened to John Dee and fucking Kelly, right? This sentiment also draws a lot of like similarities too, between what we hear from like DMT users. I don't know if you ever heard of like the concept of machine elves. Basically what we said before earlier, these like custodians of the universe,
right?
Who are like running around and they all have like functions, right? And they all do things, and they all keep like the world going. The tendency today is to offer like a psychological explanation to like the unusual phenomenon that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people say like, oh, it's all in the mind, which is like true, but it's like, dude, yes, but that begs the question, what is the mind? Right? That's obviously the next logical concept, dude. And so I think about that a lot all the time or whatever with reality and the brain and stuff, dude, because there's a great Star Trek episode where I think it was like the first or second season where Data, the android who's like sentient, right, has to go before this like board of experts to be able to, and has to argue that he's like alive essentially, right? Basically like Picard like is his like lawyer and he basically is grilling this like, brain doctor guy who's like trying to build a whole bunch of other data. He wants to like disassemble data and like create like a whole bunch of more or whatever, right? Exactly. And he basically like gets, who doesn't believe that Data is sentient, by the way.
Yeah.
And Picard is like grilling him and he's like, well, you've already fucking said like, that you have like 3 distinct like characteristics that you define as like alive or whatever. And I can't remember what they were, but it was like, he's already demonstrated 2 of your 3 fucking like, capabilities or whatever. What happens if he fucking reaches the 3rd one, even in the slightest way? What is he then? Is he alive? I don't know. Do you? And I have that same mentality of like, dude, nobody can tell you what like is true when it comes to the concept and the phenomenon of the mind, dude. You know what I mean? Again, a lot of the stuff is really hard to like talk about because it's hard to like nail down.
So subjective.
Exactly, dude.
Even if you try to explain it to somebody, they're going to picture something different from what
100%, dude. Exactly. And like with all these loaded terms, you have to like start at the very beginning. Like, okay, here's the Big Bang, right? Okay. So from then on, like, here's reality, right? Okay. Are you with me? Okay. Now this thing. So anyway, Crowley was basically part of the secret society that was famously called the OTO, which is the Ordo Templi Orientis.
Ooh.
Which just sounds fucking fancy, but it's basically just
They
this,
meet at the back of the Chili's.
Yeah,
on
but
Thursdays.
underground at the Panda Express on Friday, every third Friday night. Like with all these things, dude, nobody really knows. Like the
Sure.
it's very spurious. So it was either revived or was started in like the late 1890s.
Okay.
And it was basically just a German Freemasonry academy, okay? Created by this dude named these two guys named Karl Kiner and Theodor Reuss. And it was attempted to be like a central office of other branches that were kind of like try to like streamline Freemasonry.
Okay.
And like abolish any of the differences, right? They're trying to franchise it, right? They were like the Ray Kroc of secret societies, changing the ingredients of like the spells and ceremonies and just like replacing them with like shitty instant mix and so instant like strawberry mix. Basically, these other branches didn't like what these guys were selling, right?
Sure.
They rejected all the stuff that they were trying to. They're like, well, we like the game the way it's played now. We don't like change. I'm afraid of change.
We don't like diet Freemasonry.
Totally, right? Totally. I don't like this organic crap. I want the nonsense. So basically, they created their own group from that, right?
Yeah.
And they cherry picked all the stuff that they wanted to take with them
Naturally.
into this new whatever and recruited their members. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, Crowley authored this book called The Book of Lies. Okay. So it's called The Book of Lies, falsely so called.
Nice.
Right? Dude?
I was going to say.
Which is hilarious because it's like, what title do you believe? Like, it's the Book of Lies. Well, I mean, falsely so called, as in like, it's not lies, right? So you have to like read it to be like, what the fuck is even mentioned? Again, kind of going back to his like trolly, trickstery nature.
One of
right?
us always lies. One of us always tells the truth.
Fucking A, right, dude? Totally. The Two-Faced, the Janus, the Gemini. And so his book basically evidently explains, I mean, among other things, the secret of the 9th degree of this secret society called the Golden Dawn. And so in 1912, this dude Royce asked Crowley like why he printed this. And, in his book or whatever, it's like, why are you giving up all
our secrets?
Yeah, our secrets of like the final order or the final like level of our order, right?
Right.
And Crowley was just like, what? Like he literally didn't even know that was part of that. But because he had tapped into some like universally known magical thing.
Like he didn't learn it through the order?
Yes, exactly. He learned it through other means and then he printed it. And then this other guy who was part of the Golden Dawn was like, hey, motherfucker, why are you printing all of our secret shit? He's like, oh, well, I got this from Azrael,
Wikipedia.
the angel. Yeah, right, totally. From the internet. What's that? You'll know later. And so at this point, Crowley realized that he was like, in fact, or that rather a de facto like 33-degree Mason in these guys' group, right? And so in the wake of this, Crowley accepted the OTO's teaching as legitimate and the most important part of Freemasonry, because he's like, okay, well, if these guys figured out the same thing that I did, but through different means, there's got to be some sort of universal truth here.
Yeah.
So he joined as a 9th degree member after this Royce guy kind of indoctrinated him. They're like, all right, here, like you can just jump to the head of the line, basically, go to the second to last or the last level or whatever, right?
It's like a third grader doing calculus.
Basically.
Like,
and you're like, oh, you don't need to be there. Just jump ahead of here. Here's this college course. So before this dude Royce dies, he appoints Crowley to the 10th degree, the very outer head of this highest level or whatever, right? From then on, Crowley then runs and influences the Ordo Templi Orientis, right? He is the OTO now. Okay.
Right.
So now we're going to jump to this other guy, L.ron Hubbard. You ever heard of this guy?
Who's that?
Who is this guy? Who's this?
A wise businessman.
For real. Well, I don't know about wise, but a profitable one at that for sure.
He's a shyster.
He fucking, yeah. I mean, by all accounts, yes. Although, well, yes. I mean, let's be real. But also, well, I'll let you guys make up your mind, okay?
There you go.
Where'd you first hear about L.ron Hubbard? Let's do the same thing that we did with Crowley. Or Crowley. I don't know how we're going to do this throughout the podcast, but Crowley.
Through Scientology. And then, like, I was at one of my friend's house looking at the books.
Who's that guy above your fireplace? That giant,
not like that.
That giant portrait that you have there.
No, not like that. But I was like looking at the books. And I was like, L.ron Hubbard. I was like, what the hell is this? It's like a space thing.
Was it a science fiction book or was it a? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. There was like a few of them there. I was like,
yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. So, was your friend a Scientologist?
No.
Sci-fi enthusiast?
Like sci-fi,
yeah, totally. Well, this dude was really prolific. We're going to talk about that. I think I first heard of him, again, like you were saying, through like Scientology and through only kind of tacitly in my learning of Scientology. And this was during, when the church was going through kind of
stuff.
Yet another change of its public image. Let's say. I think it was
that's a good PR way to put it.
Yeah, exactly. Right, dude. It was
we were changing our.
It was the whole
image.
time when that David Miscavige guy took over.
Okay.
And his son was giving interviews about and there was a whole going clear documentary.
Yeah.
About people that were trapped inside Scientology and blah, 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 all the worst aspects of Scientology.
Yeah.
And furthermore, into when I saw the South Park episode, because I was big time South Park fan,
sure,
and I kind of knew a little bit about Scientology beforehand, and then when South Park brought it to my mainstream radar, right, where they were just mercilessly shitting on it, right?
Yeah. So the whole thing that happened with Isaac Hayes and everything. Too.
Exactly, because voice of Chef, right, who was freaking an integral character or whatever from forever, for 20 years on the show or whatever, almost 20 years or something like that. Yeah, who was a Scientologist who had no problem stepping on the toes of
everything else.
Literally everybody else, Christians, Jews, everybody. Then as soon as when it came to that, then it became a problem, which is kind of funny because Scientologists are very protective and loyal.
Right.
As are a lot of religious people or whatever for obvious reasons. If people are attacking your beliefs, dude, attacking your faith, I can totally understand where you would feel threatened by that, you know what I mean? And want to rally to defend it.
Right.
Even sometimes maybe to an illogical
crusade
degree. Yeah, exactly. Crusade. Yeah, right. So anyway, L.ron Hubbard in the Church of Scientology. Born Lafayette Ronald Hubbard. Fancy French name.
I don't blame him for abbreviating his name.
I wouldn't either. You know what I mean? It's the whole Waco thing where the leader, David Koresh was, that was his name or whatever, but his real name was Vernon something.
Oh, okay.
And so people were come on, man, give this guy a break. Of course he changed his name to Vernon, or from Vernon. Nobody wants that name. That name's retarded. Lafayette, who wants that name? Just abbreviate it. L.ron. That sounds awesome. That kind of sounds like some rich South African dude that started a Tesla company. So this dude was born in March of 1911, right, in Tilden, Nebraska. Beautiful country, God's country. L.ron basically began his career as a prolific writer of pulp fiction series, right? Okay, in about westerns and romances and of course science fiction, right? Uh-huh. Back in the day, writers would make their money by being either famous enough to being paid for it, or they would just be paid for how many words that were written. Exactly. Yeah. So because he wasn't famous, he became super prolific because they paid a penny a word or something was the average going rate, dude. So this dude wrote up a storm, right? Matter of fact, his son was quoted saying that he had picked up a newspaper and that all of the fiction stories that were in the paper were written by his dad.
Jeez.
At one time. Just under different pen names that he would, use. Right. And, which totally is eerily similar to what happened with Edward Bernays' daughter, who said that in an interview about her dad, that she remembers that her dad pointing out in the newspaper all the propaganda that he was responsible for. Gross. You'd open up a newspaper and there'd be different stories or whatever. You'd be that one's mine, that one's mine, that one's mine, that one's mine. These dudes were masters of the respective realm, right? Yeah. Fiction and nonfiction, right? Anyway, later, this dude joined the Navy and became an intelligence officer, like Crowley.
Like Urkel.
Yeah, exactly. But he ended up losing both of his commands.
Damn.
Yeah. So just kind of on a side note, one of them was a troller that was, or a trawler rather, that was converted into a gunboat. And he ended up so he's captaining this, right? And he had a crew of dudes, right? And he ended up shelling a Mexican island, using it in southern Baja, using it for target practice. Ooh. Yeah, just to kind of zero in his guns. And he basically created an international incident, and America almost went to war over this, right? And the other was basically a sub chaser, right? A sub hunter. Mm-hmm. Only 5 hours into his initial maiden voyage of this thing, Hubbard believed that he had detected an enemy submarine, right? So he went on this he spent the next 68 hours chasing this phantom sub, engaging in combat, dropping depth charges and stuff like that, and it turned out to be a mineral deposit on the seafloor. Dude, yeah, fired like a mofo, dude. Turn in your cap, you're fucking done, dude. It totally reminds me of
I thought you were gonna say a shark or something, but a mineral deposit.
No, well, because they use sonar and stuff, right? And so they're listening, and he's oh, that sounds like a sub. Drop that shit, dude, right? No, I mean, granted, I'm talking shit, but I'm not a Navy, like, I'm not a submariner or whatever it is, right? So I can't, like, talk shit. I've never gone through that experience, but it's hilarious that they were, like, on his first 5 hours of his first voyage, dude, this dude was so trigger happy that he was like, there must be a Japanese sub! Right. And, like, started depth charging shit, because this is right before World War II, right? And it's just totally funny, because it totally reminds me of, like, that Captain Edward Smith dude of the Titanic. Like, I don't know if you know anything about that dude, but basically he has, like, a super checkered past, dude, before he captured the Titanic.
That's good.
Where he would like part of the White Star Line company or whatever, the company line that owned he jacked up like at least two like really big expensive fucking ships, dude. Like in all accounts was like completely just like wasted at the time, right? Nice. And yet he was like, you know, put into these like positions or whatever of like new authority into this like new ship, which we might go over in one of our other episodes or whatever, has its own little like conspiracy theory stuff behind what happened to the Titanic and if it was like switched with another name of a ship in order for like insurance purposes.
Oh boy.
Anyway, he was also an adventurer, this dude Hubbard, and he boasted like crazy. Like Crowley, I'm the best at everything.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard that about him.
Yeah. He would lie about stuff and often like sex it up, and, you know, to his followers, right? To make him seem way cooler, right?
Or to get chicks, yeah.
Yeah, well, as you do, you know, fucking, who here has a party has been like, well, I've like, you know, saved an infant from a burning building while snapping a wild animal's neck with my bare hands.
Yeah, because he was well read, so he knew a lot of stories.
Exactly,
so he basically was like, yeah, that was me. I was the guy who did that.
And it's before the internet, so people couldn't,
I did the first transatlantic flight.
That was me. Totally. Yep. The, I'm on a roll of gay.
Because this was back before Google. So,
exactly. I mean, you couldn't verify any of this shit, dude. And so in one time it was, in one instance, he was said that he was like blinded in some heroic way by like machine gun, like by the muzzle flash of like a machine gun fire. You know, despite all records showing that during the war, he spent much of his time in the military hospital for fucking pink eye and like hemorrhoids and shit, dude. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like that probably hurts, but like,
no, of course, but
fuck off. Like, you know what I mean? So this was the place where he began his claims about being able to like heal people, right? And he started with like the patients that were there at this hospital, and through that was kind of discovering, you know, discoveries of buried deep within the subconscious, you know, stemming all the way back from when you were an infant in the womb, right? Right. Hilariously enough, in some cases, the traumatic events stemmed from hard fucking.
What?
Like seriously, like so.
Like breaking his dick in half?
Yeah, no, like if you're like in the womb and your dad's fucking pounding away.
Okay.
Yeah, just bopping you in the fucking head with
my face, dude. My face.
Yeah, dude. Like, so his concept was basically that if you could like remember these traumatic events and like bring them to like the conscious mind, because like we said before, like the subconscious and the subconscious and the conscious mind being like the barrier between, you know, the subconscious barrier where like symbolism lies. If you can bring that shit to the surface of the mind to be like dealt with, all of your ailments can be fixed. Like your physical ailments, your psychological ailments, all this stuff can be cured if you can just bring this like womb trauma, primordial brain trauma back up to the fucking, yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. Which, I mean, is not necessarily without its validity necessarily, right? As far as dealing with like past traumatic events that maybe you've like kind of like compartmentalized.
In that sense, yeah.
Sure. But like going all the way back to like the womb.
To the womb when your brain was still developing?
Yeah, when you're getting whacked in the head by your dad's dick, maybe a little bit like further, you know, than I'm willing to.
Really how that works.
I mean, I don't think so, but who am I? Like, you know what I mean? So anyway, in the 1950s, he wrote this book called Dianetics, right? Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. Yeah. Evidently, he would later have to change that, you know, the whole concept and the definition in 1953 from science to religion because of the whole like health claim that they were making. Matter of fact, he even wrote a letter to one of his followers kind of literally saying that he wanted to look into the whole quote religion angle because these studies are like hard to replicate. Yeah. And it's unlike science. Right. So it's like, well, if we just put some woo-woo shit on it, then nobody will have to ask us for any kind of like, you know, proof. Thank you. Exactly.
It's not peer reviewed.
Right, dude. You know, check your sources, folks.
See, so what I have to do is put my fingers inside of you, see, and then this is all going to help you.
Don't worry, it's all very scientific.
Yeah, don't worry.
Is that your wife?
Doctor.
Oh, that's hot. I mean, looks like she's traumatized. I should have several sessions with her her friend.
We're going to need more.
Who's her hot sister? Bring her here too. So, his ideas kind of became like hugely popular, especially after the war. And so with his book and the New Age that we were talking about earlier, right? This New Age movement of like neo-spiritualism, and it really took off. But like everything kind of fell apart inside a year. And there were like lawsuits and claims of, all kinds of embezzlement. All of his institutions that he started were going bust. He got divorced. He absconded with his kid to Cuba.
And he later became president. Oh,
yeah, right. Totally. Starting a fucking fundamentalist religion. He even lost the use of the word Dianetics. That's
really?
why it's not called that anymore. Or whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
But his loyal like followers used the influential like members with deep pockets to kind of bounce back. The whole concept of like going back further in the womb, living past lives, that you're like the whole concept of like the fact that you're an infinite being called a thetan. Right. Have we heard about that?
Yeah.
And you're just like living in a vehicle right now, a meat suit.
It's a vessel.
Yeah, exactly. All that shit kind of started all that stuff kind of was grafted onto this Dianetics book after things started kind of falling apart for him. Right.
Sure.
Obviously, I can take a second to recognize that this concept is actually very central to a lot of like mainstream Eastern religions, right? Of like reincarnation and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So again, like what I said in the beginning, like, yes, this dude was, in my opinion, like a charlatan, but he built his charlatanistic con off of like real shit, I feel like. And a lot of the things that we've kind of learned to like laugh about, we laugh about him because of the way he presented them to us. Does that make sense?
Right.
So you could even believe in like living that past lives in different areas of the galaxy. That was kind of his part. Also.
Right. It's not necessarily restricted to Earth.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
You could be anything. You could be like and that other beings would like latch onto your meat suit. These body thetans, right, as they call them, are the causes of all of your insecurities, your mental problems and physical ailments and your limitations. This is the combined ale of human society. Okay. Right. According to them. Right. So this is where all this weird stuff about the members, of this religion signing like billion-year contracts. Right. Where they'd like promise to come back like lifetime after lifetime to serve or whatever. Yep. This is where all the Xenu stuff comes from. That we saw in South Park with the Scientology episode.
Should we explain that?
Well, so basically the South Park episode laid it out to believe that like once you reach the highest level of like Scientology, and this is what also they talk about in the Going Clear documentary. This is a matter of fact, I think where like South Park got a lot of its like information is that like when, like in a lot of these secret societies, when you are in them for long enough and you can do all the orders and you reach like the highest level, you get to know some kind of like divine information. Exactly. Right. That knowledge differential that we were talking about earlier. Right. Evidently in Scientology, that is all that Xenu shit that I was talking about, where basically you find out that you are a infinite being in a meat suit, which all like, is totally plausible. All these like body thetans were basically these like frozen space entities by this like ruler Xenu, and they dropped them all into the volcanoes of Hawaii, and then like the spirits like came out and not know where to go, and so they attached to whatever they could find, which are human beings as bodies, and then those are like, so rather than being like the little trickster god demons that like Aleister Crowley or the machine elves or whatever that all these societies and cultures talk about, Hubbard just gave them a new name and called them body thetans. Yeah. Basically. And oversimplified them, in my opinion. Basically talking about like how like the space vehicles were just DC-8s with like space engines. Okay, so moving on to the final guy that we're going to be talking about, and that is the dude you mentioned earlier of Jack Parsons. Yeah. So you mentioned him when I asked you about Crowley, but have you heard of him outside of Crowley at all?
I mean, like what he went on to do? Or what do you mean?
Anything.
Yeah, well, I've heard about like...
Did you hear about him before you heard about Crowley?
No.
Okay.
After.
Okay. And in direct relation to?
To him, yes.
Okay.
All I know about him is basically, his basic biographical information and all the things that went on when he became an adult. Okay. And the houses he was living in, the people he was messing around with. Gotcha. And their relation to back to Crowley and the things that he went to do with L.ron.
Okay, perfect. Because I'm not gonna lie, I had no idea who this guy was. I had heard his name before, but I think only through like 1960s bands. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and as we're going to be kind of talking about, this dude was like instrumental in the American like
space program.
Yeah, space program. Thank you. And yet he's a completely unknown figure. Nobody knows anything about this guy, and we're going to find out why here right now. So few people are aware of one Marvel Whiteside Parsons, which is the kick-ass name, by the way. I don't know why he changed his name to John or Jack. You know what I mean? Because Jack is what his friends would call him or whatever. But Marvel is like the coolest fucking name ever, dude, right? So this dude was the co-founder of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratories, right? JPL. He was a rocket engineer, rocket propulsion researcher, chemist, inventor, businessman, writer, socialite, philosopher, and randomly an ardent libertarian. Even wrote a book called Libertarianism, the Two-Edged Sword, which is pretty hilarious. And it also happened to be, he also happened to be a Thelemist occultist. So a Crowley follower.
Yeah.
He was associated with the California Institute of Technology, or Caltech. And Parsons was one of like the principal founders of both the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the Aerojet Engineering Corporation. He invented the first rocket engine that was, that used a castable composite rocket propellant. And he basically pioneered the advancement of both liquid and solid fuel rockets that ushered in like the space age, right?
Yeah. He was way into rockets.
Way into rockets, like a super genius. So Parsons made a bunch of contributions to rocket development, particularly in the area of solid fuel propellant. For instance, like the solid motors of the space shuttle and the motors of the Minuteman missile ICBMs. They were all based on the solid propellant technology that was invented. That was like call back to our moon episode where we talked about kind of the differences between solid versus liquid fuel rocket rocket fuel and why. Like what are the pros and cons? Like this dude even has a crater named after him on the dark side of the moon. And yet, like, how many people have heard of this guy? You know what I mean? It seems like he was like a founding father of like the space program, and yet we don't know anything about this guy. And most people, of course, know about like Werner von Braun, right? At least to some degree. That that he was an integral part of helping the U.S. defeat the Russians in the space race, and that and that he was like a Nazi brought over from Operation Paperclip, and yeah, we'll not talk about that. Maybe not that part, obviously. So why is that? Why isn't Parsons celebrated as one of the most founding father members of spaceflight, dude? Well, it's because of all this occult shit that we're going to get into. Born in October of 1914 in Los Angeles, and having few friends, he lived like a solitary childhood and spent much of his time reading and taking like a particular interest in the works of like mythology and like Arthurian legends and, stuff like that, nerdy stuff. He also really liked the work of like Jules Verne.
Okay.
Journey to the Center of the Earth and that kind of crap. He became interested in like science fiction and became a keen reader of like pulp magazines, like, amazing stories. And that basically kind of led into his early interest in rocketry. Right. And so in 1938, he testified as an expert witness against a crooked cop who actually like planted a bomb. And because he was like a chemist, he knew like what was up. He was able to like put this guy away and be like an expert witness to the prosecution. Nice. Kind of randomly, right? Which may have been related to what had happened to him later. But we don't know. I was going to make a joke. What were you going to say?
I was going to say like, oh, well, that came back to bite him in the ass.
Came back to blow him up in the ass. We get into the meat of it here in like 1941 when he started working on jet-assisted takeoff technology. Okay. Like by himself. Right. Because, fucking super nerd, right? Early versions of this test simply involved attaching rockets to the aircraft, the fuselage and the wings of aircraft. Right. So that you can now have, nearly vertical takeoff and landing. Right. Like we were talking about earlier. Shorter runways or aircraft carriers even. Yeah. And, matter of fact, I've like seen this at like air shows where they take like rockets and they attach them, solid fuel rockets, and they put them on the wings of like a C-130 cargo conversion. Right. And then they turn on the freaking rockets and then turn on the engines and they basically can take off at like, 100 feet or whatever, so him and his buddies end up getting like funding for this, for this kind of type of research. And that's how kind of they made their fortunes and that's how Jack was able to live his lifestyle. Right. Mm-hmm. So he buying
Ferraris, blowing coke.
You know what I mean? Exactly. Big houses or whatever, hanging out with celebrities. So he marries a woman named Helen Northrup. He's 18. She's 22, right? Getting at older girls.
Attaboy.
Yeah. Helen had a younger sister named Sarah, who was 15, right? Who moved in with them to support her going to school. Right. Later in 1945, Parsons would separate from Helen after having an affair with Sarah. So they're living in LA, going to this thing called the LA Sci Fantasy Club. And it's a host of it's a bunch of people are hanging out there who are big at the time, including like authors like Ray Bradbury and others, right? Sure. And so through this and at this place or whatever, this is kind of where he meets L.ron Hubbard.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of hit it off and become besties, right?
Yeah, he liked the cut of his jib.
Exactly, right? Now, I'm not sure exactly like what made him hit it off or whatever, like what specific thing it was.
I've
they actually
heard that it was more of L.ron's stories, more of his like his quote unquote adventures.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I figured it was probably more of something that was like, something, that was more classically important, like the deep philosophical human questions, like, can the Kessel Run be done in under like 12 parsecs?
It's a great question, yeah.
Or like, Kirk versus Picard. These are the deep philosophical questions that I hope that these people are thinking of.
We would hope so. Well, only the experts.
So Jack basically started hosting these nerds at his mansion in Pasadena, California, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Parsons had like subdivided the house into like 19 different apartments, which he could kind of populate with his mixture of like artists, writers, scientists, and occultists.
Some who's
clingers
went through that house.
Totally, dude. It was like it was the place to be. Yeah, no kidding. So, and in 1942, he became kind of the head of this thing called the Agape Lodge, which is like a California-based chapter of the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis.
Right.
The
thing that Crowley
is
took over.
Exactly. Thank you. And matter of fact, legend has it that he was initiated by Crowley himself. And they end up becoming besties, right? Basically, he started hosting these Gnostic masses in his bedroom like every day, making his home like the headquarters of the OTO now, right?
Right.
Surrounding himself with all these people. So his wife kind of starts like banging one of his buddies, right? This dude named Smith.
Yeah.
Who's a former head of the OTO. I said Hoty-ho. Hoty-ho! The OTO. And basically his like free exercise of will and like free love kind of begins to clash with his like insecure side and jealous
he wasn't
right?
really about it.
Was not cool with that, right? Being an ardent libertarian also clashes with like your insecurities of being maybe like, I don't like being a cuck right now. You know what I mean? The whole reason why I brought up the history and why I brought up these three magicians, is because of something that I want to talk about called the Babalon workings.
Okay.
So Parsley, right? Fucking Crowley and Parsley. Parsons and Crowley.
That's where they got it from.
Parsley, I knew it. So Parsons, Crowley, and Hubbard are all hanging out, right?
The law offices of Parsons.
Esquire. Your case won in 30 minutes or your case is free. They're all hanging out, right, in this house, doing crazy shit. And basically, Sarah and Hubbard start having a romance, okay?
Yeah.
Everyone else at the house is like, wearing robes and these weird pyramid hats and shit. Like you see that famous picture of Crowley with the weird pyramid hat. That's all from fucking Parsley's house, right? Parsons got interested in like a specific ceremony called the Babalon working, not Babylon with a Y, Babalon, which is, I guess, is a series of rituals that were designed to invoke the Thelemic goddess Babalon to Earth. And,
right.
And apparently it's like an 11-day sex magic ritual, which is fucking exhausting. Jesus. That he read in Crowley's The Book of the Law, right? And so he began to totally like obsess over this idea called the Moon Child, which he got from Crowley, right? Yeah. One of his like, I want to say one of his like literary workings, right? Jack knew that the future of humanity was in space. Right?
Sure.
The next frontier. Some would say the final frontier. And therefore humans would need to develop that way, need to develop with that in mind.
Right.
So using magic and ritual throughout the pregnancy to embody this child with like influences that will like separate it from like the material world and the earthly low vibratorial influences of consciousness and more capable for existence in space.
Right. See, and that whole thing is so fascinating to me. You have this great scientific mind, and I'm not saying that science and spiritualism can't coexist, but just the idea of, I don't know.
Yeah, this dude who's like grounded in mainstream like science is going out on these like to us these crazy limbs of like spurious like why would you do that or whatever, like that's so dumb. It's like I have no idea what this dude was like into.
Yeah. You never really know. I mean,
that's what I mean. Like we can all talk shit all day long, but it's like, dude. And that's kind of what I think with people that like think about conspiracy theories of things in general. It's like, well, bro, we can all look down our nose at people who believe in like things that we think are weird, but have we actually like looked into why people believe things? Like there's one thing that really bugged me a long time ago about Rachel Maddow.
Okay.
She was talking shit about Alex Jones and saying that like his things that he believes is bullshit. And she's like, he believes that like there's a bunch of WASP people that live underneath the UN building or whatever and blah, blah, and then continued her conversation. I instantly was like, what? What do you mean, like, or whatever? shouldn't you be an expert on what this dipshit believes? Shouldn't you be able to, like, without straw manning this asshole's argument or whatever, can't you just like explain what he believes and why it's stupid?
Right.
Why do you have to be like, I mean, you know, I don't know, whatever. I mean, what does it even mean? I don't know. It's that again, it's like intellectually lazy. It's like, shouldn't you know what he believes in order to critique it?
Yeah.
Furthermore, he doesn't believe that, by the way, just so you know. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's changed his mind in the last like 10 years since I've heard him talk about shit. But I mean, you know, anything's possible. Parsons goes out into the Mojave Desert alone in February of 46, right? To invoke Babalon.
Yeah.
You know, again, a manifested individual incarnation of like the archetypal divine feminine, which I don't know what the fuck exactly that means, but like he tries to bring, basically he goes out and he does this like ceremony and he brings back with him what is later called the 4th chapter of Crowley's Book of the Law. Because Crowley's Book of the Law has 3 chapters, right? And then fucking Parsons comes back with this fucking 4th chapter.
Right.
Crowley's like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah. Well, I was going to expand on the divine feminine thing. For my understanding, it's like the perfect female, like just like
the archetypal.
Yeah, well,
the archetypal female,
which is really fucked up because you think it was like, well, this dude's already married and everything, but like, you know, he's kind of like detached himself from his.
I was going to say that doesn't mean anything.
He's detached himself from this woman he's basically given up to L.ron.
Totally.
They're all chummy now.
Exactly.
So he's like, well, if you're going to have her, then I need somebody, and then they're like, oh yeah, well, let's create this fucking goddess lady that's going to.
Exactly, dude. Yeah. Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah. So check this out, dude. So when he gets back, Hubbard says that he's had a vision.
Yeah.
Right, dude? Of this redhead woman riding a cat-like beast, right?
Yeah.
So he and Hubbard continues this ritual with this new follower that they had recently been hanging out with around the compound named Marjorie Cameron, who happened to be a very charismatic, beautiful, you know, little smoke show fucking like that happened to be a redhead, dude. Yeah, exactly, dude. Whom Parsons later marries that year.
Yep.
So anyway, like. And, you know, sometime later, you know, Parsons even ends up going into business with Hubbard, who, you know, to buy a bunch of like boats in Florida.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out.
No, it doesn't.
No. And by all accounts, Hubbard and Sarah kind of defraud him of all of his money.
Yep, take all of his money.
All of his life savings. And Parsons later kind of resigns from the OTO. Yeah, this is where his life falls apart, dog. Yeah. And so after that, Parsons kind of held various jobs while acting as like a consultant for Israel's rocket program. Later becoming the foundational tech that would later become the Iron Dome system.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen any of these like videos or whatever of these like countermeasure rockets that target dumb fire rockets. So evidently the Palestinians and shit who are firing like, when I say dumb rockets, I mean like versus smart rockets, right? You know what I mean? Like
they're not guided.
They're not guided. Thank you. Evidently these are fucking homemade, by the way, which is kind of crazy in of itself. But basically, this dome system is incredible when you have these dumb fire projectiles being fired presumably at your, you know, base or whatever, right? And you can use this system to kind of use pinpoint accuracy to take another rocket and fucking shoot it down, dude. It's just like taking a gun to shoot a bullet at another bullet that's already freaking firing in the air, right? Which is super crazy. So basically, to wrap this all up, in 1952, Parsons died at the age of 37, dude, in this home laboratory explosion that attracted a national media attention. And police ruled it as an accident, and some close say that maybe it was suicide, but furthermore, many, many others think that it was foul play involved. And this is going to be a continuous, like, sticky point of conjecture. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was usually very careful with stuff.
Right.
He would
know.
Bro, he did stuff before he even got, like, conscripted to do stuff. You know what I mean? Like, he was building rockets on his free time. Dude. Right. You know what I mean? But of course, naysayers will just be like, well, he was just into like occult stuff and drugs, and he ended up mixing shit that he wouldn't. You know what I mean? Which
start snorting rocket fuel.
Yeah, exactly right, totally. Which I mean, hey, that's fair, but I mean, I don't know the guy, so I'm not gonna judge him. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, it's one of those very sticky, contentious points where people are like, no, this happened and this happened, and I think that was related to back when he gave expert testimony witness to that like crooked copy thingy. Yeah. And other people are like, well, dude, he might have just kind of fucked up and just blew himself up, dude. Like,
it's possible, sure.
It happens, dude.
Yeah.
Happened to Richard Pryor. A hilarious joke where you light a match and like you shake it and it's like, what is this? Richard Pryor running down the street.
Oh my God.
He told that joke, dude. He told that joke when his first comics lineup when he got back from being all burnt up, dude. He was like, let's just get this out of the way. Like,
Own it. Yeah.
Own it, dude. For real, dude. That's why he's a legend.
Yeah.
So my final point here is basically like, I don't necessarily know what to pull from all of this, dude, but I guess maybe from Parsons' like story specifically, I guess just don't play with fire. It's kind of, and then you won't get burned. That's, yeah. Slow clap. Slow 80s build clap. No, I'm clapping ironically. They're virtually the same clap. But no, like for seriously though, like that's like funny and like a joke and shit. But like Eastern religions dating back centuries have believed in like things like reincarnation, a lot of these things that L.ron, Hubbard, and Crowley and shit have talked about, right?
Right.
You know, and until all these lessons are learned and, you know, divinity can be achieved into the next plane of existence is reach. You know, that's what these Eastern religions believe, right? Like if you're going to level up, you're going to have to keep repeating and living your life over and over.
Yeah, samsara.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to go through the valley of shit pedals or whatever they call it or whatever to get through to get to enlightenment, right? And the best that we have to explain this is like a video game analogy about leveling up, right?
Yeah.
Because we are the bewildered herd that lack the fucking like verbal tools necessary to be able to like explain this evolutionary, psychologically evolutionary process, right? Yeah. Just kind of finally like this power differential that is created by these secret societies that cloister these knowledge from humanity and to keep us all from collectively leveling up.
Right.
I'm always complaining about it, dude, because like by attempting to subvertly control culture and like metaphorically throw obstacles and like roadblocks and hurdles and stuff into the evolutionary path of humanity,
right,
is keeping us dumb and distracted and divided down here in this negative, low energy, low frequency, you know, vibration, right? And if we can ever just kind of collectively throw off these like mental and spiritual fucking weights, you know, that we're just carrying around for no reason, we would be able to kind of see that like the true power of the human, like of human creativity and imagination could be kind of completely like unleashed. And then, you know, who knows what like the world would look like after that. You know
yeah, dude, I mean?
If
we could take care of our basic needs so that everybody could be spending their time thinking about stuff.
Being psychonauts.
Invent things.
Yes, yeah. Dude. I know. Couldn't you imagine what we could do, dude? It would be awesome instead of trapped in this low, dumb fucking. So basically, I leave you, the audience, with this last question. The ultimate question is, where do you beliefs come from? As we've discussed before, dude, freaking so many of our terms and parts of language itself, at least here in like the Western society and culture and stuff like that, its meanings have been like changed, dude.
Yeah.
And some cases they're outright inverted.
Yeah.
Right. For God's sakes, Hollywood is like the most prevalent example of this. Like when you watch movies that like borrow things from reality and they retcon retroactive continuity, you know, they change the past to fit the present.
Right.
You know, and then from then on, it's like a new thing. Like I see this a lot, to be honest, in like Norse rather, or Viking mythology.
Oh yeah.
With regard to the symbolism that they use.
Oh yeah.
Because certain like dipshit poser hate groups will fucking aggressively you know, take these symbols and stuff like that and spout them as their own. And you have fucking ignorant assholes saying that these are symbols of hate. And it's like, no, you fucking ignorant dipshit. Like you're just so dumb that you don't realize like all these other, you know, connections to it. Right.
Right.
And so anyway, bro, that's why I push back so hard on this whole like critical race theory censorship thing that's happening. You know what I mean? This postmodernist cancel culture bullshit theory, dude, because one day, dude, we're going to wake up in this like soulless world devoid of creativity, imagination, free expression, all the good shit, right? All in the name of potentially not offending someone, by the way. You know what I mean? A world built on like fear and shame instead of a world built on like the drive to understand and like the curiosity and inspiration, dude. Like obey and conform instead of question and challenge. You know what I mean? And I don't like that, dude. And so anyway, just final point, dude. So like the great occult laden Harrison Ford historical documentary line, it's time you ask yourselves what you believe.
Do you enjoy the show and want to help it grow? Don't hesitate. Like, share, and donate.
So Magick.
So I was listening to some of the earlier episodes and I thought it was just kind of lame that I was like, hey everybody, fucking welcome to fucking I don't like going into
You just
that.
like going right into it?
I mean, definitely on the shorts for sure. Could get something.
We could use our radio DJ voices.
Hey there out there in Radio Land.
We usually figure it out one way or another.
That's true.
Usually whatever we think is going in doesn't end up going in. So.
That's true. We have these like preconceived notions that end up just getting tossed in the garbage anyway. So much of life is like that, where we like worry about things that have like no consequence.
Right.
It's so stupid.
It sounds better when we're just relaxed and comfortable with it. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Fucking relax right now, relax.
Just relax. So I still don't have a title for this yet, though.
You don't need a title. We'll worry about that later.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
the last thing we worry about.
No, I know. And that's why I want you to like listen to it and while both you and I are like
Magic the Gathering of
I know. Bro, I had like 100 fucking like things in my head. I'm like, nah, that's gay. Nah, that's fucking like low hanging fruit. Nah, that's fucking this other thing.
Okay, I have some ideas. But anyway, go on. We'll figure it out later.
Totally. Okay.
Something about Wizards of the Coast.
Something about a wizard sleeve. I don't know. Now hangs like sleeve of wizard.
An age we live in. Own children.
Well played, sir.